And former President Trump is blaming Democrats after the second apparent assassination attempt against him. In an interview with Fox News Digital yesterday, Trump pointed the finger at President Biden and Vice President Harris, claiming their rhetoric is causing him to be shot at. He claimed Biden and Harris are, quote, destroying the country both from the inside and out. He later warned on social media, quote, because of this communist left rhetoric, the bullets are flying.
That's not inflammatory,
and
is it?
It will only get worse. Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, also echoed those remarks while speaking in Atlanta last night.
You know, the big difference between conservatives and liberals is that no one has tried to kill Kamala Harris in the last couple of months, and two people now have tried to kill Donald Trump in the last couple of months. I'd say that's pretty strong evidence that the left needs to tone down the rhetoric and needs to cut this crap out. Somebody's going to get hurt by it, and it's going to destroy this country. All of us, and I promise I will do my part to tone down the rhetoric, but in particular, the people telling you that Donald Trump needs to be eliminated, you guys need to cut it out or you're going to get somebody hurt.
Well, this is what you would call gaslighting of the first order. And let's bring right out CEO of the Messina Group, Jim Messina. He served as White House Deputy Chief of Staff to President Obama and ran the 2012 re-election campaign. He's co-chair of the New Democracy Defenders Super PAC, whose goal it is to combat Republican-led voter suppression efforts. I'm not going to even respond to the hypocrisy. I'll just read from the New York Times this morning. Peter Baker, in his latest analysis for the New York Times titled Trump Outrage in the Modern Era of Political Violence, Peter Baker writes this in part. At the heart of today's eruption of political violence is Mr. Trump, a figure who seems to inspire people to make threats or take actions both for him and against him. He has long favored the language of violence in his political discourse, encouraging supporters to beat up hecklers, threatening to shoot looters and undocumented migrants, mocking a near-fatal attack on the husband of the Democratic House Speaker, and suggesting that a general he deemed disloyal be executed. While Mr. Trump insists his fiery speech to supporters on January 6, 2021 was not responsible for the subsequent ransacking of the Capitol, he resisted pleas from advisors and his own daughter, other family members as well, that day to do more to stop the assault. He even suggested that the mob might be right to want to hang his vice president, and has since embraced the attackers as patriots whom he may pardon if elected again. Jim Messina, this is again, it's barely even worth responding to, and I can say that on a personal level, him suggesting that I should be executed after he was angry at my COVID reporting, which basically was just reading his quotes over 6 months' time, agreeing that Liz Cheney should be set before a military tribunal because she endorsed Kamala Harris, suggesting that violence should be done to others, and his supporters suggesting that the hosts of the ABC debate should be imprisoned
and he
for
welcomes
treason.
to Mar-a-Lago people who have racist beliefs and, among other things, who are not democratic in their values.
Yeah, but we're talking about violence here. And again, the real introduction to violent rhetoric in America in presidential campaigns has been unprecedented since Donald Trump first came onto the scene in 2016.
Boy, it really has, Joe and Mika. And you're exactly right. I mean, look at Richmond, Virginia, where he said both sides were good people, as they burned their tiki torches and chanted anti-Jewish sentiments. J.D. Vance is just the latest symptom of what Trump started. I mean, he admitted that the Springfield pet thing was made up by him and others to highlight an issue. And now they're on their third day of not being able to go to school because of bomb threats and not having a government because of bomb threats in the city hall. This is what he has wrought. upon American politics. And it's now everywhere. His acolytes and his party has just become willing enablers of this. And we're seeing this all over the place. With 49 days left in this election, his supporters have filed over 100 lawsuits around the country trying to restrict voting rights, trying to restrict early voting, trying to change the laws to favor their anti-democratic movement right as people are going to the polls. We have never seen threats to democracy like these guys and Donald Trump. And in 7 weeks, if we're not very careful, he could win again.
Jonathan Lemire, we can take, as Joe said, J.D. Vance's comments with a grain of salt. He has to say whatever the puppet master makes him say. But we should point out that he is the elected representative, the United States Senator of the people who actually are being put in danger by the rhetoric coming out of his campaign in Springfield, Ohio. But bigger picture here, Donald Trump says that Democrats are the enemy within. He says they are destroying our country. He's called some of them vermin, using apocalyptic terms, which send bat signals, as we learned on January 6th and knew before then, to groups of people about how high the stakes are and what needs to be done to stop them. So thank God Donald Trump is safe. Thank God he was not assassinated in July or this week. But my gosh, there is no comparison on the rhetoric.
Not even close. And to be clear, there's no place in this country for any sort of political violence. There shouldn't be any place for political threats of political violence even. But it is rank hypocrisy and just truly rich to hear from Donald Trump, of all people, suggesting that the other side is responsible for inciting violence. Now, of course, we don't know what's in the mind of this suspect who was arrested in Florida, nor did we know what happened with the individual who shot at former President Trump in Pennsylvania back in July. There are sort of incoherent ideologies for both. But what is clear, and we know this, that Trump has inspired violence, as we're seeing here on January 6th. The attacker of Paul Pelosi, which, mind you, that Trump and his adult sons mocked repeatedly afterwards. Trump, even in recent weeks, has used the attack on Paul Pelosi as a laugh line in his rallies. He has dehumanized people, immigrants, yes, also Democratic elected officials with his words. He has called them treasonous and suggested they be executed. No one in our modern American politics has embraced the concept of political violence or attacking others like Donald Trump. And though there are some in his camp who feel like things have gone too far in Springfield, Ohio, they see the reports of schools being evacuated, bomb threats to City Hall, bomb threats to the hospital there. But Donald Trump himself, I am told, mulling a visit to Springfield, Ohio, thinks this is a winning issue there and wants to push this one even further.
Jim, there are elements of this campaign that will never end, it seems. And given the age that we're living through politically, hopefully we live through it, the election will not be over on November 8th. It just won't be over.
It won't be over, right.
Especially if the former president loses. What do you anticipate will happen?
A couple things. One, they're going to go right to the courts and attempt to overturn it. They're already having local county officials in some of these battleground states say they won't certify the election if Trump loses. Let me just say that again. Local elected officials are already saying 7 weeks before the election they won't certify if Trump loses. And so this is what we're going to have to deal with. We're going to have to deal with it in the courts. We're going to have to deal with it in the court of public opinion. And we're going to have to make sure people understand how safe and how actual this system really is, and how these inflaming rhetoric of Trump is nothing but BS. It is really troublesome that a majority of Republican voters now trust Donald Trump than they do their local elected officials, who are, as the governor said earlier on Jonathan's Way Too Early show, these are your neighbors who are volunteering to do election watching and election integrity stuff. They're not some deep state conspiracy here. They're just people trying to do their job. And yet the Trump campaign is already setting the stage to contest this. Trump's campaign manager said the other day, this isn't over on Election Day. It's not going to be over till the day it's certified in Congress, and we'll take the fight all the way. They're setting this up to have another January 6th-like protest.
Well, because they just clearly said that in their words, their deeds, their actions are going to drive down the vote. And if that doesn't work, they have been planning, like you said, to challenge a democratically elected candidate and try to, unfortunately, block another peaceful transition. That'd be the second time, only the second time since the Civil War. So before we let you go, I want to go over some quick snapshots, just snapshots of some polls that have been coming in. Yesterday, the USA Today Suffolk poll had Kamala Harris up 3 points in Pennsylvania. Major national polls, which a lot of people don't pay a lot of attention to, but just look at the trend lines. Several have her up 6 points. And yesterday we had Ann Seltzer of the Des Moines Register with an Iowa poll that had Kamala Harris within the margin of error there. You look at recent Florida polls and recent Texas polls. Many of those are now within 5 points. Nobody would have ever assumed this. By the way, Joe Biden was down 18 points in Iowa before he dropped out of the race. So I'm wondering what you make of these trend lines and where you see this race right now.
Look, I think the key word here, Joe, is movement. You're seeing movement all over the place towards Vice President Harris. You're seeing it as Democrats consolidate, and most importantly, as these suburban women begin making up their minds. The poll that made me the happiest was the Pennsylvania poll. Every day we do 66,000 simulations of the election, and Pennsylvania is the tipping point state in about 70% of those simulations. Pennsylvania is going to be the whole battle. Along with the other two Midwestern states. Doesn't mean the other battleground states don't matter. You need backup plans. You need Georgia in case Pennsylvania slides. You can combine Arizona with Nevada, et cetera. But what you're seeing in the national polls is movement towards Harris, and yet still a very close race in the battleground states within the margin of error of every single battleground state. Of the 7, all of them are within the margin of error 7 weeks before the election.
CEO of the Messina Group and chair of the Democracy Defenders Super PAC, Jim Messina, thank you very much for coming on this morning. It's